Hello, I am Mr. Singleton, one of the Associate Directors for Science for Outward Academy, and this lesson is all about drugs and their effect on society. What you should have already done before you start this lesson is the lesson previous to this, which was all about the different types of drugs and the Daphnia experiment whereby we gave caffeine to Daphnia. And the reason for that is because this pre-starter uses some of that information on the previous lesson. So if you haven't already done so, please make sure you have covered those things in them 3 lessons. Your pre-starter, I want you to draw this table into your books and put these different drugs into their categories. So drugs can be classified into these 4 different categories: hallucinogenic, stimulant, depressant, and painkiller. And what I would like you to do is to put these drugs on this list. So LSD, speed, cannabis, nicotine, paracetamol, heroin, caffeine, and alcohol. I want you to place them into the correct groups. You obviously need to go and make sure you've got a pen and a pencil and some paper. And you also need to make sure that you have your books if you are in school. So you need to draw that table and then put those in there. So I will give you 3 minutes. Off you go. Okay, let's go through the answers then. So LSD is an hallucinogenic, speed is a stimulant, cannabis is a depressant, nicotine is a stimulant, paracetamol is a painkiller, heroin is also a painkiller, caffeine is a stimulant, and alcohol is a depressant. Well done if you got those correct. These are the lessons within the drugs topic. So you've done your pre-start. I just want you to have a look at these lessons and we are at the bottom, kind of like 6 o'clock on this circle. So the effects of drugs on society, realities of smoking we're going to cover in this bit, and also testing drugs. So they're the 3 bits that we are covering in this recorded lesson. Today's lesson, you need a title, Effects of Drugs on Society, underlined with today's date, please. So what we are going to do, the challenge is identify ways in which drugs have an effect on society, and our aspire is to compare the costs of different drugs on society. So our starter, I want you to have a think about this one, about this statement, and you need to come up with really arguments for and against this. So alcohol is the most dangerous drug to society. True or false? If you think that's true, you need some reasons for it. If you think it's false, you need some reasons for it. Really, we should be able to come up with both of them. So I would, if you were at home, line straight down the middle of the paper, true, false, and put some arguments for and against it. The same as if you're at school, but just do it on your whiteboard. Off you go. Right, leave that on your whiteboard or on your paper, and we'll go through and add little bits to it through this lesson. So alcohol is a chemical called ethanol, and it's found in alcoholic drinks, obviously. And it's very, very socially acceptable, which means that if you are there drinking a pint of beer or something, most people would not bat an eyelid. But that doesn't mean that it can't be harmful. So it's a very socially acceptable drug. You know, if someone was taking heroin, it's probably more noticed and frowned upon by society than someone just having a drink at a pub. So every drug, we've talked about this in previous lessons, every drug is a chemical that alters the way the body or the mind works, and alcohol does that. Firstly, it can affect your nervous system, and it slows down your reaction times, and that's the reason why you are not allowed to drink and drive, because it slows your reactions down so you can't react. And it is a legal drug, but obviously if you end up drinking too much and become drunk, then it can lower your inhibitions and it can affect your judgment, and that can obviously have immediate. So alcohol is a recreational drug. It's not taken for any medicinal purposes, and it's also a legal drug, which means you can buy it and have it and not get arrested, as long as you're over the age, of course. So it does have short-term effects and it has long-term effects on the body. Now it does go into the brain in about a minute, so it travels in the bloodstream, and it can do a lot of damage to brain cells and cause depression. So lots of people who drink too much alcohol can become depressed over a long period of time. The other thing that it does is it damages your liver, and the reason for that is your liver is an organ which gets rid of poisons from your body, and alcohol is a poison. So your liver will grow larger if you drink alcohol over a long period of time, but it can then also damage the liver and cause cirrhosis of the liver or cancer. So liver cancer can be caused by too much alcohol. So I want you to think about what the short-term effects and the long-term effects of alcohol. You've got 2 minutes to jot down as many as you can. Off you go. So short-term effects of alcohol. These are some of the things that you should have written down. If you don't have these written down, please make sure you add them. So sleepiness, so they can make you very tired and give you bad judgment. Poor balance, so this is why people end up stuttering around the place. It causes poor balance. Poor muscle control. Blurry vision, so sometimes in schools they have these like beer goggles that you can put on to see how it affects your vision, so that it becomes blurry. And slurred speech. If you haven't got any of them written down, please write them down now. I'll give you 1 minute. Okay, long-term effects of alcohol. These include damage to the liver, which we've talked about, damage to the heart, stomach, brain, lungs, because you are, trying to get rid of this and it's going around your body. The liver removes alcohol from the bloodstream, and that's why it gets damaged. So it can lead to cirrhosis, liver cirrhosis. So that is a healthy looking liver, and that is a liver with cirrhosis. Okay, So drink driving also has a massive impact. So alcohol slows down your reactions and affects your concentration and affects your judgment. So that's why it's so dangerous to be drink driving. Around about 3,000 people are killed or seriously injured because of drink driving collisions. And obviously, alcohol affects different people in different ways. So, if you are thinking of driving when you are older, it's just best not to have a drink at all. Remember, alcohol can stay in your system if on a heavy night. It could stay in your system for 24 hours. So you don't just think in the morning, "Oh, I'm okay now." It can stay in your system for quite some time, depending on how much you've had to drink. So you always have to allow for those types of things when you are thinking about driving your car. And that is one of the effects on society, because this affects people's lives in a big way. So how does alcohol affect society? So we're going to just have a look at this in a little bit more detail before I want you to write anything down. So some of the things that we've already talked about. So we've already talked about drink driving. We've already talked about the way it affects a human. But on society, the other thing that happens is you get alcohol-related crime. So alcohol-related crime would be those things like vandalism or having fights after having too much alcohol on a night out and those types of things. The other thing that happens is you get an increase in hospital admissions. So lots of these people will end up in A&E either with injuries or with alcohol poisoning. You also have alcohol-specific deaths. So we've talked about them really a little bit in terms of liver cancer. And you also get a loss in productivity because people take things like sick days because they're hungover and things like that. So there are the different ways that alcohol can affect the society. I'll let you write these down and write some little notes around them. Okay, so onto the preliminary. This is just a quick fire A, B, C, or D. You can just think about this if you're at home, or you can write this on your whiteboard if you're in school. Alcohol is classed as what type of drug? Is it A, depressant, B, stimulant, C, hallucinogenic, or D, painkiller? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. It was A. Alcohol is a depressant. It slows down your body's reaction. Next one. A drug is a substance that A, changes the way the brain works, B, changes the way the body works, C, changes the way the body or mind works, or D, changes the way the eye works. So quickly wipe it off and then a new answer in 5, 4, 3, 2. It was C. It changes the way your body or mind works. Which one of these is a long-term effect of drinking alcohol? Please remember it says long-term. Sleepiness, cirrhosis, slurred speech, or poor balance. 5, 4, 3, 2. It was cirrhosis. That is the end of this lesson. And I'm going to move on to the next lesson during this. So if you have completed this lesson, well done. And we are going to move lesson. Before we do this, I want you to have a look at these two sets of lungs and tell me what's the difference. Off you go. Okay, nice and easy and quite quick. You should see that there's a colour difference. There is also a size difference. And there is another difference there. There'll be less surface area, but we'll talk about that in a second. So one is a healthy lung, which is the red one, and the other one is a black one, the black one, which is the smoke. So we are going to look at cigarettes today and smoking. So our challenge is to identify and describe the components of a cigarette. And then we're going to look at these e-cigarettes, which are quite a new thing. And we're going to evaluate the effects that they have on society. So title in your books or on your paper, depending where if you are working from home, Realities of Smoking, underlined with today's date. Starter for today then is I want you to have a look at these pictures and tell me what you think they have in common. So we've got an organ, and if you can tell me what that organ is there on the left, then brilliant. And then we've got something that's a little bit more grotesque on the right there. If you can tell me what you think that is and what it has to do with today's lesson. I'll give you 30 seconds. Off you go. Okay, on the left there then is a pair of lungs from a smoker, and quite disgustingly on the right there, that is a picture of a leg of a smoker. So they're kind of like thinly sliced, a leg. Obviously, once the person had died, they're not going to do that while they're alive. So they're thinly sliced just to show you the effects that smoking can have on a leg as well. These are the things that you would find in a cigarette. So basically you have this filter, that's the little white, that brown bit at the bottom, but as you open it up, it's a little white bit. And then you've got the tobacco in there and the paper. So that's what a cigarette would look like if you just held one. But actually, when you open up a cigarette and you look closer, these are the types of things which are actually put into that, what you would consider tobacco. It's actually a mixture of a lot of different chemicals, including methane, which is the gas that's that's released from like waste or from poo and things like that. You've got arsenic, which is an element which is a poison. You've got ammonia, which is found in toilet cleaner. Cadmium, which is found in batteries. All those different chemicals put in by the cigarette company and rolled up into a cigarette. These are the three main things that you need to be aware of. So you have tar, which is a substance which contains carcinogenics. Now, a carcinogenic is something that causes cancer. It's a known chemical which causes cancer, and cigarette companies will just put that into the cigarette. What it also does is it coats the lining of the alveoli. Now, the alveoli are the air sacs which are in your lungs, so they allow oxygen into your body, which is obviously essential. And then what obviously happens then is because it coats the lining of the alveoli, you can't get as much oxygen into your bloodstream. Nicotine they put in there because it's an addictive drug, very addictive drug, as addictive as heroin. So they put that in there so it makes people want to carry on buying the cigarettes. It leads to heart disease, and it can raise your heart beats because it is a stimulant. And then there's carbon monoxide, which is released, and that's a poisonous gas. Now, we know carbon monoxide possibly from faulty boilers. Sometimes faulty boilers can release carbon monoxide, and unfortunately sometimes that can kill people, because what it does is it attracts itself to red blood cells really easily, and the red blood cells are more likely to carry carbon monoxide around than they will carry oxygen around. So then that can cause the person not to get as much oxygen around again, and obviously cause damage. You need that table in your book, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes to draw that table. If it takes a little bit longer, then please just pause the video and then you can finish it off. So you've got 3 minutes starting from now. Okay, you got 1 more minute. Next thing we need to look at are the long-term and short-term effects of smoking. So in your books or on your paper, I just want you to make a quick table, short-term effects on one side, long-term effects on the other side. Use a ruler and make it into a table, and then put these down as short-term or long-term effects of smoking. So bad breath, body odours, premature aging, smelly clothes, smaller lungs, poor athletic performance, high risk of cancer, heart disease, and emphysema. Let me just talk to you about emphysema very quickly. This is where the alveoli in the lungs, remember those air sacs, that part where the oxygen transports from the lungs and into the bloodstream, they become a lot smaller. They don't stretch as far as they should be able to do, and therefore then you don't get as much oxygen into your body. So you just need to go through those different effects and label them as short-term or long-term effects by putting them into your table. I'll give you 2 minutes, off you go. Okay, let's go through some of these answers then. So bad breath would be classed as short-term, body odours is short-term, premature aging is long-term, smelly clothes is short-term, smaller lungs would be long-term, poor athletic performance would be long-term, high risk of cancer would be long-term, heart disease would be long-term, and emphysema would be long-term. Now these are really interesting, e-cigarettes. So it was that if you wanted to give up smoking, you could move on to e-cigarettes, and it gave you some nicotine without all of those horrible chemicals in there. However, these are some of the new issues that we might see with vaping. Now take it back nearly 70 years when cigarettes were invented and people were smoking them. There was no long-term research on cigarettes and their effects. We didn't know that they caused cancer. We didn't know they had carcinogenics in them, so people didn't realize that they were a health risk because there was no long-term studies which had happened with cigarettes. So people got addicted to cigarettes not realizing that they were bad for their health. And this is the only worry, that these e-cigarettes have come out and there's no long-term studies on these e-cigarettes either. We've not had them that long that we can see what happens in 20 years and if they can cause cancer. What some of the new headlines have come out with is that they could lead to heart disease still, strokes and heart attacks, or it might damage blood vessels and the heart. And also it is a stepping stone. If younger people are starting on e-cigarettes, then they might then move on to actual cigarettes. So that bottom one there with healthy living on, e-cigarettes could be a gateway to real cigarettes. That's what that's implying, that once you start smoking e-cigarettes, you might want to go on to something a bit stronger and go on to cigarettes. So although it looks like these e-cigarettes are brilliant and it reduces deaths, they might, because we don't know yet, they might have longer term problems. As the plenary for today, I want you to tell me these 3 components which are found in cigarettes. I've already told you what it is and what it does. I just want the names of them. So 3 quick names of these chemicals on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper. Off you go. Okay, I told you I'd be quick. So the first one should have been tar. The next one should have been nicotine. And the last one is carbon monoxide. Well done. Go on to the next lesson if you are moving on. If you are not moving on, then you just need to do some work for the rest of this lesson. Great work, guys. This is lesson 2 of this week's work. And what I want you to think about is go back into the last couple of lessons when we've done about drugs and define what a drug is. Off you go. You've got 30 more seconds. Okay, so what you should have is a drug is a chemical which changes the way the body or the mind works. Title for today. So if you're working at home, please make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper, and the title is Testing Drugs. If you are in school, make sure you have your book, pen and pencil and ruler, and your title is Testing Drugs. Make sure that's underlined with your ruler and today's date on, please. I will give you 30 seconds. Off you go. Our challenge is to be able to describe the stages of a drug trial, and our aspire is to explain the importance of trialing drugs. Why do we need to test drugs before we can use them? Now, you may not have heard this story. I just want you to have a think about why we might want to test a drug before we use them. Massive now, because we're talking about trialing drugs for COVID-19. We're talking about trialing vaccinations and things like that. So what is the point? Why do we do it? Now, there is a section here, some pictures here of some reasons why we might want to try that. But I'll give you 20 seconds to think about why we might want to test drugs before we trial them. So the reasons why we would want to test are to find out the following things. How effective is it? Is it actually going to stop the disease that we are using, or is it going to stop the condition that we're trying to? Is it actually safe? Is it going to cause really serious side effects? Is it going to kill the organism or kill the person? and how much of the drug should be given to each person. So they're the reasons why we would want to test for a drug. So how effective it is, it must prevent or cure the disease, or at least make it feel better. It mustn't be too poisonous, or it mustn't have unacceptable side effects. And then how much will we need? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write those bits down. Off you go. As again, in any of these lessons, you have the ability to stop and pause the lesson if I'm going too quickly for you, or if you need to skip because I'm going too slowly for you. You've got that ability to just to stop and then write the bits down and then start it again. You've got 1 more minute. So best drug trial that was ever done was taking place by this person called William Wyvern, and he was an English botanist and a doctor, and he trialled using foxgloves, those little plants there, to cure people with heart conditions. And he crushed it all up, the plant, into a drug which is called digitalis. So what he did was he got the substance that he wanted from the foxglove, and then he gave it to a small group of patients with the disease. Then what happened was he used it on a large group of patients to see what the dosage was, and then it was out for general usage. So obviously better to trial it on a smaller group of people with the disease to see if it works. If it's really dangerous, then obviously then it only kills a small group of people, and then he used it on a much larger sample. So what I want you to do is answer these 5 questions. You can just do this on a whiteboard or very quickly on your piece of paper. A 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they are just single answers. So you can just very quickly answer the question. So how many stages were in his drug trial before it went to general use? What was the name of the drug that he trialed? What did his drug treat? Where did he obtain his drug from? And do you think modern drugs are still tested in this way, and why? Here are the answers to your questions. So William Wyvern had 3 stages on his drug trial. The name of the drug he trialed was digitalis. He was trialing the drug to treat heart conditions, and he got that drug from a foxglove plant. But hopefully you've put that no, drugs are still not tested in this way. We need to make them more valid and more reliable. So drug testing now goes through a whole lot more stages than just that one by William Wyvern, and that's because drugs can have very serious consequences if they're not tested thoroughly. And we're going to go through this story. We've learned from obviously history about this drug testing and how to do it properly. So this, unfortunately, in the 50s, there was a drug called thalidomide. And this drug was used for people who had trouble sleeping. It was like a sleeping tablet. And it worked, and they tested it properly. They tested it on these people who had trouble sleeping. They made sure it wasn't toxic to those people, etc. And it passed the test, and it got released into the public and was allowed to be used. What they found out as they released it is that it was also good to stop morning sickness in pregnant ladies. So they released this tablet and then said, oh, it's really good for stopping morning sickness. However, at no point did they test it on pregnant people. And unfortunately, these pregnant ladies who were having trouble with morning sickness took thalidomide, and it caused their babies to have these differences within their body. Generally, it was shorter limbs. So if you look at these children at the bottom there in the swimming pool, they have shorter arms, and that was what happened because they took, or their mothers took thalidomide during the first trimester, trying to stop morning sickness, because this was never properly treated on pregnant ladies. So we never knew its effects. This drug is actually still available. Obviously not now to pregnant ladies because we know what actually happens. Obviously not in the wider public, but actually it's used to treat leprosy. Now, leprosy is a disease that affects your nervous system. It stops your nerves from being able to fire pain or fire impulses in your extremities and your fingers and your toes, which can damage your fingers and toes because you could end up chopping your finger off and not really realizing that you're chopping your finger off. So thalidomide is used to help relieve and treat leprosy now, but we'd definitely not give it to pregnant ladies because of the effects that it had on their offspring. So modern drug trials now are much more reliable and much more valid. And we're going to use the next couple of slides to complete these 6 stages. So in your books or on your piece of paper, I just want you to split it into 6 areas: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, stage 6. I'll give you 1 minute to do that. Off you go. Okay, if you haven't done that, please pause the video, and we can move on. So the first stage that we have is laboratory tests. So even now, before we even go to look at trying to put it into any human or anything like that, we will trial it in labs. And those laboratory tests are basically using computer samples. So we can use a computer simulation. We can look at how the drug might work. The next process in the lab stage is animal testing. So we will breed rats and mice basically, and what we do there is we are testing for its toxicity, if it is going to kill those animals. And then after that, we will do it will be cleared for human testing, but it has to go through ethical bodies first. Now, when we are talking about rats and mice, they are grown grown in a lab and tested for those. But it is interesting that some drugs which still pass that test are still moved on to human testing. So paracetamol is a drug which is used very, very commonly over the counter. Obviously, you've all probably taken it. Calpol and things like that have paracetamol in, but that would actually kill cats and things like that. So when they tested paracetamol On cats, it killed them, but it still moved on and went through its human testing. So into human testing, they will ask for volunteers. I think you can get paid about £3,000 for testing new drugs. So they will ask for healthy volunteers and not having any illness. It's quite refined who they ask for. They ask for certain age groups. They ask you to not smoke, or they ask you to be healthy, etc., etc. But healthy volunteers, and that's just to look at if it's safe and any side effects that you might get. After that, then they will select people with the illness that it's trying to cure. And at this point, they can actually test to see if it actually helps cure that disease. Okay, we're quite far on here, and we're only just testing to see if it is effective in curing the disease. And we'll also look at side effects. And then after that, we will put into phase 3 lots and lots of people. The more people we test this on, the more likely we are to get valid results. So we give it to large numbers of people with the illness, and then we get the full information about the drug. And then the drug is licensed, and then we'd have a look at the long-term risks and the benefits. If you need to pause this now, and you can fill in your table a bit more. There are 3 sections that you need to be able to be very confident in using, and that's these 3 words: so placebo, double blind, and ethics. You may have heard of these sometimes before, particularly a placebo, but we'll go through them. So a placebo, and you have to be careful how you do this, is a tablet which does not contain the drug. So when we are trialing this drug, what we will do is we will give, let's say, 50% of the patients that we're trialing on the actual drug that we think is going to work, and we'll give the other 50% a placebo, a fake tablet. It does not contain the drug in it. So it's as effective as a Tic Tac. Can't put that in your example. That's basically what it is. It just doesn't have the drug in it. So it's a tablet. It looks like a tablet. People think they're getting the tablet, but actually they're not getting any of the drug at all. And this is because sometimes when people think they're going to get a drug that works, and it will work because of their belief that it will work. So some of the people who get a placebo will actually get better because they think they are getting the drug. So placebo is a tablet which does not contain the drug in it. A double-blind trial, and this picture helps out a little bit. Sometimes if you give the doctor the drug and say this is a new drug, you're gonna give 50% of your patients this drug, and you're going to give the other 50% that placebo. Well, the doctor might treat the people with the drug a little bit differently. So they might get better because they get more of the doctor's attention compared to the people who get the placebo. So to stop that biasness, what they do is they do a double-blind trial. And this is so the patients don't know if they are getting the drug, and the doctors don't even know who is getting the drug. The people who do know getting the drug are the people who made the drug, so they can run the figures and see what's happening. So a double-blind trial is when the doctor doesn't know if the patient is getting a placebo or the drug, and the patients don't know if they are getting the placebo or the drug. And this bit here at the bottom, ethics, this is about, is it right or wrong? There's no right or wrong answer to these ethic questions, but you've got to be able to give your opinion and the other side of the opinion. So an ethical question would be, is it right to test drugs on rats and mice? Now you can turn around and say, definitely not. It's not fair on the rats and the mice. They haven't come into this world wanting to be tested with drugs. It's very cruel to those animals. They have a right to life, and that is definitely a perfectly acceptable reason for your answer. You might also turn around and say, yeah, but if we didn't test on mice or rats, then we wouldn't have all of these other drugs. And that gave you an example of thalidomide that wasn't tested properly, and that was tested properly on mice and rats. But you might then say it might stop a lot of this disease that's happening with humans. It might stop a lot of deaths that are happening with humans. So these are ethical questions. Okay, and you've got to be able to argue for and against them. You've got to be able to see both sides of the story. So I'll just go into this a little bit more, and you can write some of this down now. I've just gone through it very quickly. But placebo effect is where you think you're going to get this wonder drug and you think you will get better. And some studies have shown that even if you're not taking this real drug, you still can, it can still make you feel better. So placebo is a fake drug. I would say it's a drug that doesn't it's a tablet that doesn't contain the drug. It might look the same, taste the same, but it doesn't have that active ingredient and it doesn't have that drug in. So what I want you to do is fill in these. We've talked about a double-blind trial. You should be able to fill in this bit. And I want you to answer these questions. So draw that table very quickly and answer what you think an open label is and what a double-blind is. And you should know that one. Why do you think then most drug trials will use a double-blind trial and not the other two? I'll give you 3 minutes. Off you go. You've got 1 more minute. Okay, so an open trial is one where the doctor and the patient knows if they are getting a placebo or getting the real drug. A double-blind trial is where neither the doctor nor the patient know if they're getting a placebo or the drug. And then the answer to the last bit of the question, why do you think most trials use double-blind trials now? And that's to avoid being biased. I'll give you 30 seconds for you to answer or fill in any bits that you missed. So ethics, we've talked about, it's about morals, the idea of what's right or wrong. So is it right to test on animals for drug trialing? And you've got to be able to answer for and against that, really. Which animals do we use during them? Well, here is your pie chart, really, of what it is. You can see that most of the animals are mice, around about 70%. Then the next largest is rats, and then we've got lots of other mammals. So we're looking at basically nearly 80% of those tests being on mammals. Well, why? Well, that's because we are mammals, and we are hoping that they would react the same as other mammals would. Now, there is birds there and amphibians and fish, and that'll be to see how it affects those animals as well. But if you look at that total number of animals used in 2005, you're talking nearly 3 million animals in labs being tested, long-term effects of these drugs. Is it right? Is it wrong? It's up to you to decide. But you really, I can't stress this enough, you've got to be able to argue for and against. If you are really struggling with, is it right, is it wrong, then here's some arguments to help you with it. So the suffering of these animals is minimized as much as possible in all experiments. The labs that are testing these drugs go under routine inspections to make sure suffering is minimized. And the benefits to humans, the drugs that we have been able to test has been massive. Lots of different drugs which cure lots of different diseases, which people close to my family and probably your family have taken to help them get better. And we couldn't be able to do that without testing on animals. The things against this, obviously, is it does cause suffering to animals. Even though we try to minimize it, it will cause some suffering to animals. And the benefits are not always proven for human beings. We talked about that thing with the cats. So they do react in different ways, okay? And we are now looking at more computer simulations that could help us to prove that these drugs work. So we're trying to do it in different ways, or we could just use more human beings to make sure it is right and it works. So plenary then, I just want you to match up these three words: placebo, double-blind trial, and ethics. I think you've got lots of this in your book. So all I want you to do is, if you are at home on your piece of paper, just draw 3 boxes on one side, 3 boxes on the other, and just join them up. And if you are in school, on your whiteboard, 3 boxes on one side, 3 boxes on the other. Don't bother writing them, just draw the lines. So that should be a nice, quick 30-second match up. Off you go. Okay, so we should have a placebo is given to the control group in drugs. It looks at drug trials, it looks exactly like the real drug, but there's no drug inside. A double-blind trial is neither the patient nor the doctor knows whether the patient has been given the real drug or a placebo, and that leaves ethics as the morals or people's ideas of what is right or wrong. That is the end of these 3 lessons. That is the end of the drugs section of year 8. So you should be having a assessment next lesson. If you need to, these are all on YouTube, so you can go back over the lessons and pick up any ideas as revision. But good luck in your test, good luck in your assessment. I'm sure you'll do great. Well done.